Pixel Project Radio is supported exclusively by listeners like you. If you would like to join the other kind folks who have decided to support us, folks like Dave Jackson, Dustin Miller, Eric Guess, Ryan Yingling, Poppy the Keaton, and Chris Copleen, you can do so by heading to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. We have a variety of tiers to choose from, and for as little as $2 a month, you'll get such bonuses as bonus episodes, our schedule in advance, exclusive Discord channels, topic suggestion priority, scripts, and, most importantly, our undying gratitude and thanks. Once again, that's patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. Thanks. On to the show. My name is Rick Firestone, the scribe of being bald and beautiful.
My name is Ben Bugale, the scribe of forehead kisses and crawling around on all fours.
Huh, okay. And obviously, by that intro, you know you were listening once again to Pixel Project Radio, a video game club and discussion style podcast where we play through the games that we love, some of the games that you love, and we talk all about them.
We sure do. And this game that we're talking about today is, I don't know about you, Rick, I don't play many in this genre very much. And today's game is a Rick pick, which I always love saying a Rick pick for that little bit of you know what I'm saying, that little alliterative bit there.
An end rhyme.
It is an end rhyme. Rick, what game are we talking about today?
Well, closing out our spooktacular October is a game called Inscryption, a game that released in October of 2021 on Windows and later got ported to PS4 and PS5 just this past just this past August 2022.
I had obviously, as you know, you have seen a lot of stuff on this game, and I'm glad that we're doing a game that's been released recently. That's very exciting because we here at Pixel Project Radio, we are a pro video games podcast, in case you haven't picked that up from the last, how long has it been now? And so we're celebrating games of all across the gamut, but this is one of the newer ones we've ever done together, isn't it, Rick?
Yeah, I think it might be the most recent. I haven't confirmed that, but it certainly might be. And, this was a cool one to pick. I knew that I knew that I wanted to pitch this one for October, right? Because it's got that sort of horror flair. And flavor. I think upon playing it, it lost some of that. It's not quite as horror-centric as I was expecting, which isn't a knock. It's just, it is what it is. But this game, you mentioned the genre. This is a sort of roguelike deck builder / ARG escape room meta puzzle game.
I like that meta puzzle especially. Yeah, this game, and that's just it. I think that it kind of feels like it's going down the horror route, but ultimately, I think it takes us to a place that is curiouser and curiouser. Yeah, this game, Rick, I was not ready for any of this. I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but I was very, very wrong about when the game was ending and other things, but I know we will get into all of that. So again, thank you for picking this.
I think this is going to be a good one for us to discuss. And to sort of propel us into that, if you're new here to Pixel Project Radio, at the start, we like to do sort of mini reviews to give a sort of TLDR, a little sample scoop flavoring of how we felt about the game that will sort of prompt the discussion forward. They used to be one sentence and they quickly got out of hand. But we still lovingly refer to them as our one sentence, with one doing some heavy lifting there. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You go first, baby boy.
Okay, I'm interested to hear what you think of this. Inscryption puts ticks on all of the boxes that might fascinate millennials of a certain age. It's a tactical card game, It has roguelite and like elements, and it is encased within an ARG full of found footage and the flavors of internet creepypastas. Unfortunately, the game, for me, is an amalgamation that is not more than the sum of its parts, borrowing too judiciously from established tropes and trends, and ultimately creating peaks and valleys that promote an inconsistent experience. This game, for me, it's got a lot of high highs, but a lot of low lows. To me, it's a 6 out of 10, maybe a 6.5 out of 10. And for those that are new, too, by the way, when we assign a number like this, we use the whole scale. So an average game is 5 out of 10. We know in the zeitgeist of Game Informers and IGNs that a 7 out of 10 is average and anything below is bad. Nah, we use the whole scale, baby. Whole pocket.
Fascinating. What I have for mine is as follows. And I'm glad we used at least an iteration of the same word here. Inscryption amalgams, do you see what I did there? Deck building, escape rooms, and mystery into one cohesive package. The unsettling atmosphere of this game, paired with goals that are seemingly just beyond reach, creates a game that breeds an incessant need to press onward. For me, this was a 9.7 out of 10.
Okay, so 2 things. One, I'm really glad that you said that, because I had a feeling that this was going to be very much up your alley after I started playing through it, that is. So I'm excited to talk about it with you. 2, is amalgams a verb? Can you verb that?
I mean, I did.
Yeah, baby. That's the spirit. That's how we do it.
Because I could say, what, Inscryption amalgamates? Because an amalgamate blank, right? It's
once you get to words that are of a certain currency, once you get to those $10 words, you can start transforming them in however you want, and most people aren't going to bat an eye.
Most people pull out their monocles, yes.
Perchance.
No. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about this game. This game straddles a couple of different genres that we mentioned in the beginning. The card game that is present throughout kind of goes through different permutations as well, largely staying in a roguelite style and also a trading card game style. So like if anybody has ever played the Pokemon trading card game for Game Boy Color, a game that I haven't played in a decade.
Yeah,
but
it's been like a long time.
I remember loving it. It's pretty similar to that at certain points, but it's also similar to your roguelite style card deck builders or games or what have you.
Yeah, permutations is a great word. It takes on a number of different forms, which is why I kept feeling confused about when the game ends. And I want to say this right now for all of our listeners. If you are listening and you're just enjoying yourself and you're kind of bobbing along and you're like, yeah, I'm thinking about playing Inscryption, I would very heavily advise you to stop listening. And I would say, come back and listen to this after you play through the entirety of the game. Now, if you don't mind things being spoiled, stick around. Have a good time with us. But at the same time, this game is built very, very firmly on the amount of mystery that is packed into it. And that is the reward, is the things that you solve and the things that you can't solve.
Very much so. And that's one of the game's strengths. And we're not going to spoil crazy heavily until we start talking about how the game goes. But there are even some things that we have to bring up as we talk about it. And while they're not spoilers, they're things that like I personally would have liked to have found on my own.
Exactly.
So I agree with Ben. I agree with you wholeheartedly. If you're listening to this, maybe you're driving, you just got back from a little Dunkies trip, got your little iced latte, maybe you added a little hazelnut flavor because you were feeling a little spicy. And you're gonna press play, maybe pause it, go experience at least the first act of the game, and then come back. Because, even though I wasn't as hot on this by the end as I thought I would be, there's still a lot of good in here.
And boof that coffee. No, don't actually do that.
Boof it.
Boof it. Like cheesecake. Yeah, no, there's just, I feel like there are a few things that you and I could talk about with this game that, like, if we were to say it, someone could go, oh man, I wish I would have too. Exactly what you said. I wish I would have stumbled onto this on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where do you want to start, bud?
Well, can I actually say something to you?
Yeah.
So this is to you and this is to whoever is listening. Rick, I You know me. You've known me for 12 years now, about, right? Maybe 11.
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
Rick, what's my favorite game of all time?
Majora's Mask.
What's the next game down?
It's either Breath of the Wild or Skyward Sword.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's actually okay. That's those are fair answers. Undertale always mixes in there too. This game, this Inscryption game, has solidified itself in my top 5.
It has a similar flavor to some of the Undertale, and as well, it's got flavors like with Doki Doki Literature Club or the classic horror game I'm Scared. It has that sort of meta element that, you in this game, you don't go in and mess with any files yourself, but there are flavors of that within.
There are, and something that is worth mentioning just off the bat, since we're kind of speaking about the nature of the game, and I know we'll get into the game here in a moment. In the nature of the game, I would say, you look at it and it's kind of spooky looking. It really lacks jump scares, and that's not a bad thing. It's just like I'm Scared, for example, right? It prides itself on being that kind of sound effect, something is rushing you and it's scary. This game, no, it has you kind of tense and on edge. At least that was my experience.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, when you look at the screen grab on Steam, what do you see? You see darkness, stylized font for the title. You see totems that have animals on them and a very creepy pair of eyes and hands, and also Inscryption, the word is spelled with crypt within it. So immediately you're thinking like, okay, so this is a horror game. Death is involved somehow, or dead people or something. And that is part of it. But there is an element to it. When I likened it to creepypasta, what I mean is that there's a major element of writing that I've seen in internet creepypastas within this game where it falls flat for me. I'll get that out of the way right now. Where it takes something like, what if there was an evil spirit, an evil entity, and we put it into something that like what if there was an evil video game? Or what if there was an evil computer? Or what if there was an evil file on your computer? Like it's that kind of thing. And it ultimately is never really, like, you don't really get to see it. You're just told about it a lot. And you hear about it and you're told how horrible and scary it is, but it's never actualized in a real way. It's got that kind of flavor to it for me. And especially in the later acts. So that's part of the reason why this game fell a little flat for me, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. It's, for me, I kind of realized as it was going on that as much as I was playing, I was also watching a story unfold. And for what they were trying to do with this game, I mean, that's where it landed for me, is the fact that I felt like what they were ultimately trying to do, I feel like they accomplished, though there were still some moments, I'm not going to lie, and that's why I couldn't give it the full 10. There were some moments where I was like, maybe wanting a little bit more, whether it's length or whether it's something a little bit more founded. I don't know. But I know we'll continue to talk about this as we continue to talk about this.
The length, the width, and the height.
And the girth.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Especially the girth. Before we get into what makes this game, I wanted to read some community correspondence, community contributions that we got from our Instagram and our Twitter, where I put out a call for folks that have played this to tell me about it. So we got a couple. Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog podcast, a great friend of the show, he said, I think Inscryption's key trait is that among all of these extra games with, quote, something extra, like Pony Island or Doki Doki Literature Club, is that at its core, Inscryption's card game is a ton of fun to play on its own, and the meta stuff is tied into the cards themselves.
I mean, I don't want to get too far into talking about the game yet, but let me just say, I have played the card game in pursuit of something else that we will talk about later many, many times. And I can't tell you the last time I put 30 hours into a game in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also agree with Dave very much.
Yes, Dave. Whenever I see you, kiss on the forehead. Just saying.
We got another piece of contribution from Brian from the Listoff podcast, our good friends at the Listoff podcast.
We love.
Yes, both Dave and Brian and the co-host Ryan have been on our show and vice versa. So great people. Brian has to say, fantastic game with incredible atmosphere, twists, and a competent CCG at its heart. One of the best games of last year. I think he feels very similarly to about this game as you, Ben.
I mean, as much as it borrows from like other things, it's still very much like I look at it and I'm like, well, you didn't make Five Nights at Freddy's again, did you? You know what I mean?
Sure. We also got one more. When I put the call on Twitter, I said, tell me what you think of this game. Have you played it? MP Berger, I believe of the Bits of Time podcast, but I'm not 100% certain on that. His Twitter has confirmed that. That is where he's from. He says he hasn't played it, but the image of Leshy sort of reaching out to grab you reminds him of Andros from Star Fox. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I always thought Andros was pretty creepy.
He's a big creepy boy monkey thing.
Is he a monkey?
I mean, technically he's some sort of ape.
Much like all of us.
Poo funny. Ooh ooh. Ah ah. Do you remember that one, Rick? Do you remember Poo funny? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I always think of the one sound, the sound meme of the monkeys where it's like, life good, wife mad, kill wife, wife gone, regret, sad.
Yeah. It'd be like that.
So now that we've returned to Monkey, why don't we talk a little bit about what you're doing in this game? Or do you want to talk about the development first?
We should probably talk about development and maybe about like what in tarnation Daniel was thinking.
Yeah, sure. So Daniel, being Daniel Mullins, is the guy that created this game. If you're familiar with the name, you may have heard or played his other game, Pony Island. Have you played that game?
No, but it looks interesting and engaging.
Yeah, I had actually never heard of it until Inscryption, so it might be something fun to check out. I've heard it's like a 1-session, maybe 2-session kind of game.
Oh, okay. So Daniel Mullins created this game. It was released October 19th, 2021, which was, just in time for spooky season, as it were. I think something that we will talk about, well, how do I say this? Let me pivot here. Yes, it was developed by Daniel Mullen Games. Not many names are listed here, but Jonah Senzel was the composer of the music, and they have given him some pretty heavy credit, at least on the Wikipedia page. And I am curious to know, Rick, about your thoughts from a compositional standpoint, how you felt about all of the music in this game.
I really like the music quite a lot. It makes use, it's string heavy, but that doesn't mean like string quartet or orchestra. The main theme has this sort of plucked, it sounded a little bit like a plucked viola to me. I'm not 100% certain.
I think there was some banjo and there was some acoustic guitar.
There's definitely acoustic guitar. I'm specifically thinking of the plucks that occur at the beginning. I wasn't sure if it was banjo or if it was some kind of an altered viola. It's not a steel string, is what I was ultimately trying to get at.
Yeah, and one thing I do like in the sound engineering is the fact that whenever the acoustic guitar does have some material, it's very you can hear the frets and the sliding on the strings and everything. It's very raw, and I think it adds to that atmosphere, which I feel like could be the Pee Wee Herman word of the day, because this game is very atmospheric, but very minimal languish-filled music throughout this game, and I think it really wraps you in what Daniel Mullins is going for.
And that atmosphere is also achieved through backmasking. There is a lot of reverse sound that happens throughout. There is also some percussion. some deeper percussion, and a lot of the instruments are on the lower end of the spectrum. So there's a lot of upright bass. It sounds like bowed upright bass, I should say. It's very driven by bass.
Mm-hmm.
Even the few times where there is a sort of hummable melody, it's going to be in the lower tessitura, and I think, and also tons of reverb, and those two things together are always going to give you a sort of ominous kind of character, a very stern, uncertain, creepy sort of character.
Oh yeah, and there's, to kind of talk on the music, it's very, very minor centric, and there's some diminished sort of sounds to make you feel very uneasy, and lots of tritone action. Yeah, it's just so beautifully put together. Yeah, thanks be to God for Daniel Mullins making this game. I don't know, he basically made my third favorite game now, so I'm just pleased as punch that we played it, Rick.
This was born out of a smaller project that he was making, where I am not seeing a title, but it was, kind of modeled after Magic, which is very plain to see in this game. The card game has reminiscence of your Magics, your Yu-Gi-Ohs, and even some of the more contemporary ones like your Slay the Spires, your Monster Trains. But that was a theme, and the theme of sacrifices was also a big theme, and that's kind of where this project grew out of. And one thing that was interesting to me was that he, after Leshy was in place, the sort of main dungeon master, the main scribe, as we learned that they're called, the other three fell into place through the idea of like Pokemon gym leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So Leshy, the scribe, is associated with beasts. The others begin to become associated with robots, wizards, and the undead. And I think that's very cool. I liked having 4 different flavors of main antagonists, quote unquote, in this game.
Yeah, and again, spoiler alert, everybody, we're getting into it now. I liked the antagonists, and I also liked what comes later involving the antagonists and you. Yeah, and Rick, that whole Pokemon gym leader style, that is very, very apparent when you get to a certain act in this game. Yeah, I thought it was pretty clever. I thought it was pretty clever the way that these acts were laid out and all of the transitions.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the acts, why don't we talk about how the card game is played throughout the 3 acts before we get into the adjacent gameplay elements?
I think that's a great idea.
So the card game, in Act 1, you're playing the same card game throughout all 3 acts, but it's in different sort of styles and flavors. Act 1, I think by most people is considered to be the most successful, so much so that Mullins actually developed an additional mod onto the game called Casey's Mod, where it's just that opening style of play. Which is very good, because this game, unlike some of your other roguelites and your, card games of that category, this game has a definitive story and a definitive end. It's not endless. So this edition of Casey's Mod lets you play that first style of the game to your heart's content, which is very cool. I love the first style of this game. And actually, fun fact, so this game is on the shorter side. You could get through it in like 12 hours. Which is the number that I was seeing thrown around. When I first got this game, I knew nothing about it, but I exclusively played it in Discord chats when I was talking to other people, just hanging out, or whenever I was imbibing in the fruits of alcohol, as one does, sipping on some bubbly, right? I wasn't in the club, I was in my room, but, sorry, 50, but you know what I mean? And it took me, because, in both of those situations, your focus isn't where it should be. It took me 12 hours the first time to beat Leshy. I thought I was done with the game, and then Act 2 starts up, and I was like, well, what the fuck is this? So I put it down for a little while, and when I came back to it, I was like, oh, okay. I could get through this pretty quickly, whenever I'm actually focusing on it. So that was kind of funny to me.
No, I had a similar experience with another act where I was like, wait, what the hell? It's not over yet? Because I was so like wrapped up in the game and in the atmosphere that I was like, what am I doing? This game, I can't do that well with this game. And then suddenly I realized all the things I was doing wrong. And I slowed down and I played the game more slowly. And suddenly I was actually beating it at that point. But yeah, I was kind of just running my head into it over and over again. So I understand the whole, wait, you mean it took me 6 hours? It took me 12 hours? It took me how many hours? Yeah, I get you.
So in the opening version of this card game, you're playing on a field that has 2 rows apiece, and each row has 4 slots for cards. So that's a total of 16. It's a 4x4 board. And you are playing monster cards to attack your opponent. That's ultimately the goal here. Each of these cards has up to 4 attributes. They've got their attack power, they've got their health, they've got their cost, and they might have sigils. In addition, to their name and their portrait, which is nice. The way that these cards are drawn looks really, really great. It's it looks hand-drawn, but not so much that it looks amateurish. It's a very nice presentation.
Agreed. And the way that the board is laid out is such that, well, and we could get into the weeds about the cards and how the game is played, but the way it's laid out is such that when we're fighting Leshy, which we'll be talking about plenty in a little bit, you can see what card he's going to play a turn in advance. And he also has his own cards that are, kind of played or are already on the field immediately. And then you have your turn to put down your card. So he doesn't necessarily see what you're playing next. Though he, I don't know, as a dungeon master, he kind of knows everything that you could do in the game, I guess.
Sure. And that notion of being able to see your opponent's next plays is important to the experience of this game. This game wants you to break it. This game wants you to become overpowered and just crush everything. But when you're playing the game, when you're summoning monsters, they're going to attack at the end of every turn, no matter what. This isn't like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, where, only one card can attack, but you also don't have to. No, every card attacks from left to right at the end of each turn, which is important. If you attack your opponent directly, well, actually, let's save that for a second. If you attack an opponent's monster, you are either going to kill the monster or deal damage to its health. Health does not replenish at the end of each turn, so if a creature has 1 health at the end of one turn after being attacked, that's where it's going to be at the next time. If there are no creatures, you attack the opponent's life points directly. And this is done not through a counter, but
I love this.
At least at the start, through a scale system. And I agree completely. I also love this. Do you want to talk about the scale system?
The scale system, it's this, how do I say it? There's this glowing eye that's kind of in the middle of this scale that resembles an old school candelabra. And the way that you win is you have to have it at any time more than 5 life points damaged to your opponent. Listen to me. You have to have at least 5 life points worth of damage done to your opponent in order to beat them. And what they use to keep track of where the scale is, they're not weights, they are golden teeth.
Right. The cool thing about the scale system, though, is if I deal the opponent 3 points of damage, now I'm up by 3. If they deal me 4 points of damage, now suddenly they're up by 1. So it's got this balancing mechanic, which can be helpful too, because sometimes, if you know that they're going to beat you the next turn just by the correct amount, let's say it's 2, you can play a card and attack them for 1, and that buys you another turn. And that becomes part of this mechanic. It's very cool. And that's sort of what sets this apart from other card games. I like it a lot because you can really abuse this system. It's very cool.
On the other side of the system, it's worth saying that in the card game, Leshy and other opponents you play are basically, quote, cheating, end quote, at all costs, which I find to be more curious. And I don't mean like doing things like in the middle of the card game, like, just, well, actually every example I'm thinking of is exactly what he tries to do. So, but we'll get into that more with the story about the fact that some of the characters that are developed, we'll just call them for now, really interfere with how the game is played from your basic combat that you're taught at the very beginning.
I had mentioned costs of cards. So each card is going to have a cost associated with it. You've got a side deck exclusively consisting of squirrels. Squirrels have no attack power and 1 defense. They can be summoned anytime. You can play as many cards per turn as you are able to afford. Squirrels cost 0. If a card costs 1 blood, then you have to sacrifice 1 monster. Kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh! In that way. If a card costs 4 blood, you have to sacrifice 4 monsters. But you are not bound to only playing 1 card per turn. You can play as many as you're able to, which again ties into the theme of just breaking the card game. There are also sigils. Sigils give your cards special abilities. There are a lot of these.
Too many to just sit here and list.
Yeah. And sometimes you can even finagle your cards into having 2 sigils. We're not going to list all of them. Yeah,
or
truly.
4.
We won't list all of them, but a couple that I liked in the first act, I managed to get a sigil where 1 card was worth 3 blood, and then also a sigil where that card was not perishable. So if you sacrificed it, it didn't die, which is basically just free summoning material. Great. I love that. What about you?
I am guilty. I did that. I had the permanent sacrifice card on, and I think I put that on a black goat at one point. And so I could get 3 at any time. So anything that's worth 3 blood or less, you could summon basically for free.
Some of the other useful sigils, there's one that lets you attack your opponent directly, even if there's a monster in front of you. That one's pretty good. There's one where your cards can hide underwater during your opponent's turn. So your opponent can't hit those cards, but they will still hit you, but they won't hit those cards.
It's very imaginative. And there was points in this game where I honestly kind of felt like I was, because of the way it was presented, it kind of makes me feel like I was back being a kid again, playing these kinds of games, imagining the cards doing like what I would imagine that they did. You know what I mean? Like those cards that go underwater, like they flip over and you just, they have like a symbol on the back that says that, it's like a tail of like a whale going underwater, and like, what that means. Really clever, all of these things. Also worth mentioning in the battle sequences are that you can acquire some items. Is it safe for us to talk about the items that we can acquire?
That's perfect. I was actually about to volley that ball to you, but you took it from me first. So I love that we're on the same page. Before we talk about items, I neglected to mention another cost instead of blood can be bones.
The bones are the skeleton's money. In our world, bones equal dollars. That's why they're coming out tonight to get their bones from you.
Bones are acquired when your monsters die, whether through force or through sacrifice. So that's just the other summoning method.
Oh, but and it's important.
It is important because, again, there is just so many ways to break the system, and I love that. I don't often get jazzed about like breaking a game, but this gives you the tools to do it in so many different ways. It's just playing the game is a ton of fun. And to that end, let's talk about these items that you can get, because items and totems together are a real doozy.
I want to show you, and then we'll talk about this, one embarrassment of a card that I did make at one point. And I don't want to say too much about it, but I'll get into it in a moment. But I just want to show this to you to see what you think about this guy.
That's a very good card.
It's talk about breaking the game. Which, yeah, Rick has mentioned that, and it gets me kind of giddy too. So yes, bones are introduced after we're introduced about how blood sacrifices work. I think Leshy says at one point that they do experience pain.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to talk about the items, though?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to talk about that real fast, because bones. At the beginning of the game, I mean, there are some items that I think you're just kind of given and not really told why. They're kind of thrown on the sidelines. One of those is a pair of pliers, which is one of my favorite items in the game, if for no other reason. Well, I'll get to that. There are items like you can have an extra squirrel in a glass bottle. You can have a black goat that only takes 1 blood sacrifice, but it can get you something worth 3 blood sacrifices. There is a jar of bones. There are other cards that you can find in bottles like boulders or frozen opossums. But the pliers are one of the first items you're given, and you're not told what it's for, which I love, because I was just in a battle with Leshy, and next thing I know, I've got the pliers, and I'm holding them, not me, but the character, is holding the pliers and is ripping a tooth out of my jaw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great that they don't tell you exactly how that works up until you go to use it. And then you put that tooth onto the scales to tip the game into your favor just a little bit. That's my favorite part, is such a sacrifice is only worth 1 point.
And the sound folly here is just awesome. They nailed the sound engineering, because you hear like this this fleshy cracking as if you're pulling this tooth out of your mouth, and it's very, very it's very visceral. And then you hear it pulled out, and then your screen kind of tinges red a little bit, and you have this sound that is similar to like the concussion grenades in Call of Duty, where like your ears are just ringing. It's so... And there's another item that we'll get into, I think, that's more story pertinent than it is right now pertinent, that also had a surprising bodily twist to it. But these items can help you in a pinch, and then we've also got totems to help us out. So Rick, I'm going to volley that to you.
Yeah, so totems consist of 2 parts. They consist of a sigil and a head. And essentially what you're doing, you find these totems through the map, which is what we're going to talk about after we finish talking about the card game. You find these through the map, and what they do is whatever head you have, it can be beast, reptile, or bird, or squirrel. Whenever you combine that with a sigil, it makes it such that all of your cards bearing that type, squirrel, beast, reptile, or bird, will have that sigil. Again, you could break the game with this. The squirrel head is something you have to find through the escape room portion of the cabin, but the rest of them are pretty good too. I think a pro strat is to get the squirrel head and then attach some kind of game-breaking thing to the squirrels. I think at one point I had it such that when a squirrel died, it just returned to my hand.
Oh, geez Louise.
Yeah, which essentially creates infinite squirrels. But you can also make it so like when somebody attacks your reptiles, they lose a point of health. You know, something like that. Your enemies can have this too. You'll find those on the map, those nodes where you fight an enemy with a totem. You don't get anything better for winning those. In fact, you don't get anything.
No.
But sometimes they're often on a path where whatever's after that is a nice item or a nice bonus that you can get, you know?
Yeah. Which that is actually also part of the game that I guess we've not talked about, but I think that's more story, wouldn't you say?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So.
But as far as the card game goes, without getting into story stuff, that's pretty much the basics, no? Like, did we forget anything?
I don't think necessarily. I mean, again, there's so many sigils that do so many things, and I know we can talk about our own personal experiences with sigils as we go, but I mean, that's how the game works. Shall we talk a little bit about how it was received?
Let's finish out the card game talk through Acts 2 and 3, because it'll be much quicker.
Yeah. Good point.
Just to finish this up super quick, the card game in Act 2 is largely the same, just with added perks and added mechanics that relate to the story. We'll talk about that when we get there. It also becomes more of a trading card-esque game wherein you can only have 20 cards in your deck, which isn't a lot. It sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot. And you have to create that deck. It makes it much more difficult because there are no card limits in the first and third acts. The third act is kind of a reskin of the first, except again with different mechanics that relate to the story. So we'll get into those once we're talking about the story.
And I think that's just it, Rick. I think that's the thing I love about this game so much is that the story is always first, and the story is wrapped around everything. You know what I mean? Like, I love that.
Well, the story is first in the first two acts. I would argue that the third act, a big part of it, is that our dungeon master in that act does not care about the story. It's all just a numbers game.
It is, and I also love that, but it's still part of the story.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But he doesn't care the same way. Character development is wild. Reception. Anyhow, reception.
Can you hear me now? Good.
You know, he left Verizon for Sprint, and everyone was like, "Oh, ho, ho, that's funny." And I was like, "It's late stage capitalism in America, and we're gonna laugh about some guy in a commercial." Sorry.
Once again, you jokesters, you thought you were done with the leftism after Night in the Woods.
Sorry,
and after
everyone.
PT. We're back.
Hold on to your hats, everyone. Ronald Reagan is still the biggest problem. Digressing. Anyhow, this game.
There's an awesome. I don't mean to digress too much. This is just a super quick aside. There is a really great Twitter account called Ronald Reagan Updates.
No.
And periodically, it will just tweet, "He's still dead."
Oh my God.
Pretty cool.
Wow. No, well, I mean, he is. This game received generally favorable reviews, according to a number of sources, to be quite honest. I mean, we can go through the scores here. It's weird that with these kinds of games, Rick, it's harder to find sales on games that are less brick and mortar-y. You know what I mean? Downloadable games just seem to have... People follow them differently than, like, you know, whenever like Sonic 06, for example. We can measure that and say like 4 million units were sold. But this one's it's not units, you know?
I mean, it is. It still is.
I mean, it is.
Those metrics, just like, anytime I hear those metrics, I'm just like, yeah, okay. Like, it's not that I don't care, but I kind of don't care.
Right.
You know?
No, and that's just it. Like, for example, we have here, by January 2022, the game had sold more than 1 million copies. And like, that's all well and good. It's always funny to me.
Doesn't mean anything, though.
No, and like copies, I'm like, you mean it's been downloaded that many times? Like, you know what I mean? But I digress. Maybe that's just part of growing up as a Toys R Us kids in the 90s. I don't know. Anyhow, review scores. We have Game Informer gives it a 9 out of 10. GameSpot gives it an 8 out of 10. IGN 9 out of 10. PC Gamer US gives it a 69 out of 100.
Nice.
Nice. Metacritic for PC, 85 out of 100. For PS5, 87 out of 100. It won Game of the Year for the Game Developers Choice Awards. It was nominated for a number of other awards, and it won Excellence in Narrative, Excellence in Design, Excellence in Audio 110%. And that was at the Independent Games Festival Awards. And in 2022, at the 18th British Academy Games Awards, it won Best Game Design. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a really well-liked game. I think the criticisms that I've read of it, anyway, are fair. But you know, it's there's a statement in here just that I'm seeing that jumped out to me, that said, "In its initial hours, Inscryption is an eerie delight full of mystery. That feeling fades long before it ends." And I mean, that's a really succinct way of summing up kind of how I felt about it. I don't know. Very good. Like I said, it's got so many high highs, but they don't always measure up. Before we move on to story stuff, we talked about the card game, and you know, we kind of tucked aside some of the more story-based elements. We haven't talked about the other elements of play in this game, because you're not just playing a card game. You're also doing little puzzles in a cabin.
That is the escape room that we've mentioned earlier, which, you know, it also plays into the story very heavily. That there are a lot of, you know, you could argue like Zelda dungeon style puzzles of varying. There's a variety of them. There are a lot of different styles. And also mixed in is a board game. Technically, we propel ourselves forward with the board game that we're playing.
Oh, sure. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. You mentioned escape room. The setting of this is a cabin with our dungeon master to whom we keep referring. His name is Leshy. We learn that later. But between card games, we are free to get up and walk around. It's first person, and it moves just like in a grid, like cardinal directions in a grid. Think like Persona 1 if you've ever played that. And you can interact with things around the cabin. There will be little puzzles, like game-based puzzles where you have to like score a certain amount. Little like puzzles dealing with sigils and safes and things like that you solve throughout the game to give you better cards in some circumstances and story-related progressions in others. It's a neat change up to the pace that makes things feel, I don't know, it makes them feel a little more interesting. And the second and third acts kind of switch that up a little bit, but we could probably just talk about that whenever we're going through the story.
I think so. It's so much more immersive whenever you are put in that first person point of view and can walk around the cabin, though, in only so many paces and again, only the cardinal directions, as Rick said. But it adds an element of mystique to the game. And like, you sit there and go, okay, what is the importance of me doing this? Or, what is this? You learn that there are some things in the room, like a cuckoo clock, are a puzzle, but you have no idea how until you reach a certain point in the story, which that part is always just brutal to me. But yeah, no, the way that this world that they have created is very masterfully done, if I do say so myself.
It, at least atmospherically, it has a ton to offer. Whether or not the story proper, and specifically the ARG stuff, resonates with you, I think will ultimately depend on how much of that you've seen in the past. For me personally, for example, I've been through I'm Scared and Doki Doki. Like, I've been through all of the major ones that have the sort of ARG twist to it. So, and in general, I'm not like, that doesn't wow me. It's fine. So I wasn't too crazy about the ARG. I also kind of think the story to the ARG is silly, but that's just me. But I'm also a big fan of found footage. A lot of people talk shit on found footage horror films. I love them. I really do. I have a very, very, very pronounced soft spot for them. And some of the found footage here, some of it works, some of it doesn't. I was listening to another show and they referred to the whole production of the found footage stuff as feeling very like amateur film, like kind of like a school project. And I heard that take before I played. And as I was playing, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Because it kind of does. Kind of, especially when the representative comes to the door and they're like talking. It's very, very student film project-y, kind of.
I don't disagree. That part left me wanting a little bit more, admittedly. A lot of the other stuff, though, it felt relatively organic, but then that stuff felt just a little bit forced. Yeah, and the thing is I guess the way that I see it, and this is not an argument, this is just like a thought. It's like, how many Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals have we seen that like it's the same formula of guy gets girl, guy loses girl, guy gets girl back. You know what I mean? Like that's still used in like God knows what percentage of musicals that exist today. It's all about how they package it, and I liked the way it was packaged in this one. I look at it against Doki Doki and against I'm Scared, both of which I also love. Yeah, I thought it was well used, but I also I know if I've seen Guys and Dolls and if I've seen South Pacific, I don't know if I need to, I know what's going to happen in the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm not making the argument that this should have reinvented the wheel, and because it didn't, it's a no from me, dog. You're right. We see this constantly in music, right? That's a big criticism of current day like new music performers. Is like, how many more times are we going to program Beethoven whenever there are really up and coming composers out there.
Oh my God.
You know, it's one of those kinds of things. And we see it in video games too. Like Dragon Quest is a great example. The formula for Dragon Quest does not change. And the fans love it. Like that's what they come back for. They come back because it keeps that same formula. My thing is, you're exactly right. The packaging is what makes this so unique. How could they, like, when I say it fell flat, what do I think they could have done better to make it stand out? The lore behind the ARG could have been better. The third act, I think, is kind of weak compared to the first act, especially. You know, it's just all of these things. And like, to be clear, I'm not a game designer. I'm not a game writer. I'm just a white guy with a microphone. But
Me
you know,
too. Sorry.
that's my perception of it. You know, I'm going to keep saying it, but there are valleys. Like the highs are high, but when it drags, I mean, it's really noticeable because they set themselves up so well in the beginning.
The only thing that I can say about Act 3, because I know I was exhausted by Act 3 and I started to dislike it. And then I realized Act 3 had to happen for the game to end the way that it was going to end. Not saying that it was my favorite act, because, you know, like no one goes to Guys and Dolls to hear, you know, someone sing More I Cannot Wish You. No one goes for that song. But is it what convinces the love to happen? Unfortunately, yes. You know what, like that.
Yeah, they go to hear Sit Down, You're Rockin' the Boat from Nicely Nicely Johnson.
Precisely, they do. But that's what I mean. Like I kind of put myself in the story aspect and just said, okay, you know, like I don't like this, but I don't know what's coming yet. And that's the only reason that I was like, oh, okay, so we had to experience this to get this. But I still agree that it is a valley in a sense.
It's so funny that you made the Guys and Dolls pull. When I was doing a residency and working with an opera company, they played Guys and Dolls, and I really messed my voice up trying to like sing the Sit Down, You're Rockin' the Boat, because that Nicely Nicely Johnson, he's a high tenor. Well, not a high tenor, but he's a tenor. You know, he's going up to G's and A's that I don't have, and messed my voice up. But anywho's, that's
you know what I mean, though. You see,
I know what you mean. I know. I'm trying to be relatable to the listener so they come back.
Because, you know, all of our listeners are into music theater from like the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Right?
Well, a good chance that if they're into music theater, it's either that or Hamilton, you know?
Oh my gosh. I don't...
And much like Hamilton, here's two lame white guys rapping. Take it away, Ben.
Oh my God. Just put a fork in me.
So before we get into the story, who would you recommend this game to?
Something I said in my review, I used the word unsettling. I would recommend this game not to people who are looking for horror games. I would recommend this game to people who really enjoy mystery and suspense movies, people who like movies like Shutter Island or Rear Window or The Secret Window. Or, no, I'm not just going to keep naming window movies, but sincerely, I would recommend this game to anybody who likes games that have twists, but not so many twists that you get nauseous.
I would also recommend this. First of all, I agree. I would also recommend this to people that are like me and that don't play a lot of roguelites or card games, because if you're fresh to these mechanics, Act 1, at the very least, is an absolute blast to play. It's so much fun. You know, if you're really into Magic and really into Monster Train and stuff like that, you know, you've probably seen this stuff before, so the shine isn't as strong with you. But, like, I don't play that stuff, and I just had so much fun going through it. And, you know, spoiler alert for the upcoming sections, I liked Act 2 a lot, too. A whole lot. But we could talk about that.
Yeah, Act 2 made me go, oh, this is the game. You know what I mean?
Literally.
It's like the title of the movie in the movie was kind of what was happening at that point. And interesting, by the way, that you pointed out that Crypt was in the title, because I always saw the title of the game as a mix of Inscryption and Encryption, like encrypted.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's as valid of a reading as any. I didn't do any research into what the title meant, and I'm not seeing any jump at me from the pages that I have open.
And I'm not even gonna read. So Daniel Mullins, if you're listening, please give us a review.
I don't understand the question, and I refuse to respond to it.
Yeah, you know me, Rick. You know me. What else is there to really go through, Rick?
The story.
I should say so.
Let's cue it up. Let's open our eyes, observe our surroundings, and accept the deck from the mysterious Dungeon Master as we make our way through Inscryption.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing, is the very first thing that we hear when we start this game. I forgot that entirely, but what we're hearing is the voice of a young man saying exactly what I just said. Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing, which is, it's kind of implied that you're starting up a camcorder and that you're watching footage, which very quickly pans away into you being in the game. And I love this start because it just feels like you are thrown in with little to no understanding as to what you're about to do.
And notably, you cannot select new game at the beginning. You have to select continue.
Yes, I love that.
This game has an excellent intro, I think. When you click continue, you're immediately thrown in to the game. Your interior is that of a cabin. It's very dark. It's storming outside. All you can see of the person in front of you is their eyes. And what I love about this is when the person in front of you speaks, you don't hear them. You read their text, and it's accompanied with this like bass boosted whooshing noise. I'll probably put some in here.
Yeah.
But also when they speak, their eyes kind of swirl around into spirals.
Orange and black spirals, yeah.
It's very creepy. And it sets up the ambiance really cool. And this is where you're thrown in almost immediately to your first card game. And that's where you're taught how to play the game that we kind of detailed before.
And we don't know that his name is Leshy yet. We only know that we're sitting across the table from someone and their eyes open very, very slowly. And it sounds like a door is opening and squeaking as his eyes are opening. And I think the first thing he says is that it's been ages since a new challenger has appeared.
Yes. Yeah. This person, we'll just call him Leshy since
we know who he is now.
A half dozen times at this point. He takes the role of a dungeon master, and he is incredibly committed to this role. He is very focused on setting an ambiance, setting a mood, setting a story. Very focused on that, to the point where he sort of plays as other characters. And this actually becomes important pretty soon. But at the start, the card game is played by a sort of board game-esque board. You have a character piece, and you move across these nodes. You can choose what your path is. It's kind of like a multi-path system. And each path is going to have nodes that correspond to either battles or buffs to your cards, things such as that.
Which I think I failed to mention that, with the buffs to the cards and with the sigils and with the things that we're about to experience, I really love the customization. Like, I know you talked about breaking the game. It's a similar sort of thing. Like, you can make the game into what you want it to be, and you can be as chaotic as you want. It's really great. And this is, we very quickly learn that we are on this route. We don't know precisely what it's going to lead to, but it's that first map that he puts before us after teaching us how to play this game. Yeah. And he also points out something I guess we forgot to mention about in the combat is that he can forfeit. He can give up. Leshy will say, I surrender, and offer you a quill that you can take and just end the match. He said, you can either take this or you can finish me off.
And this is interesting because it's seemingly at random. Like, if you're ever in a stalemate where, like, you're doing 1 damage to him and he's doing 1 damage to you, but you're all out of cards, he'll generally always forfeit. But, like, sometimes he'll forfeit in a time when it's very clear that he's going to win. And sometimes he'll forfeit, and if you keep playing against him, he'll beat you. So it's like, it's kind of random. I couldn't figure out a rhyme or reason to it. And, I've heard it said maybe it's because Leshy, as a DM, compared to another one that we'll see later, is so focused on a story and a mood that the gameplay comes second. So maybe that it's to that point. I don't know. If it is, then it's great. I love it.
Yes. It is worth mentioning that if you run out of cards against Leshy, starvation sets in.
Oh, that's interesting. I never ran out of cards.
Are you
so
serious?
I didn't know that this mechanic existed. Yeah, Ben, I'm just so good at the game, man.
You are so good at the game.
No, I'm really not. I would always either lose puberty. I would always either lose or die before I ran out of cards.
So, well, then hang on to your hat there, Richard. What happens is that if you run out of cards, starvation sets in, and he starts playing immediately across from you. Cards starting with 1 attack, 1 defense, to 2 attack, 2 defense the next turn, to 3 attack, 3 defense the next turn. So he basically just squeezes you until you lose. So that can happen if you run out of cards, squirrels and your regular cards.
See, I've run out of my regular cards and just had squirrels. I don't think that happens then, does it?
No. You have to be completely out of cards, and it takes a lot to actually beat the starvation folks. I did it maybe once because when I really had no idea what I was doing, I was running out of cards, and then to win against them is a real SOB because each one comes out more powerful. I think it happened to me once against one of his dungeon master forms, which we will get into as we continue down the board. The number of things. Should we just go over the different encounters we can have whenever we're walking along the board?
Yeah, let's talk about some of them. I'm going to lead off, if you don't mind.
Please do.
With one of my favorites, which is the trials. So this is a rarer one, and it on the board it kind of looks like a cave. But you'll come across these, and you'll get 3 cards set out, and you flip them over, and you have your choice. You could go through what's called a trial. And it'll be something like, draw 3 cards, and if the combined strength is over whatever number, you win. If at least 1 card is a rare card, you win. If at least 2 cards have a sigil, you win. Something like that. Now, if you fail, that's fine. You just move on, and you don't get anything. But if you win, you generally get a card that is OP in some way. You'll get a card that has a sigil that it shouldn't have. So maybe you have a wolf that normally just is 2 attack, 2 health, but this wolf will, be able to fly and strike your opponent directly.
And attack in 2 directions, yeah.
Yeah, or maybe you get a bear that has the death sigil. So like anything the bear attacks, it dies. Something like that.
Yeah, we have trials. We also can deal with trappers and traders, where we can give the excess gold teeth that we win from battles to the trapper, who gives us pelts, which we give to the trader and can trade up for some good cards for. We can also go to a place where we sacrifice a card, its sigil, and put it on another one of our cards. And keep in mind that squirrels are not able to be accessed for these things. So this can only happen with main deck cards. There's one where you can sacrifice a card and it's just gone for forever, but you always start the match with 1 bone. So that's a whole thing.
There's the campfire node, which will see you surrounded by a group of hungry survivors around a fire. They ask you to warm a creature up next to it, and you'll be able to play it. That creature will gain, it's usually either 1 attack or 1 health. And I think like in the first run, you play it once and then that's it. You take it away. In subsequent runs, you could play it and you could risk keeping it there, but there's always a risk that keeping it there will result in the hungry bystanders killing it.
Yes.
And you lose that card for good. I got burned, pardon the pun, on this one more than once. Do you know that there's a certain creature that you can put by the fire that will get rid of them? Is it the stink bug?
It's the ringworm.
Oh, that's what that card does. Okay, no, I didn't know that.
So you can actually kill the survivors if you put the ringworm by the fire and keep pushing your luck. Eventually they will jump and eat it, and then the next time you approach a fire, no one is left. Leshy says that they must have all, met some terrible fate through something that they've consumed. Like who would give them such a foodborne illness or something like that? And then you can just OP your card for a little while by the fire.
And that's good DMing. That's good storytelling from a dungeon master perspective.
Oh yeah, and there are other symbols that we can run into on the board. Again, you've got battles, which are kind of ordinary, and then you've got totem battles, where he has a totem against you that he powers his own cards with. And there are a few others that we encounter along the way, but as we begin in our first time through the first map, that's pretty much what we have.
Yep. Your first run is generally always going to end in failure. I think there comes to a point where, like, you get into a fight and they just keep playing bears. And I think you're meant to lose, because when you lose, what happens is Leshy takes you away and he creates what's called your death card. He takes your picture, you get to name it, and it'll go through your cards, choosing the death card's attack and health, the cost, and the sigils. And it ends with him taking your picture, and that kind of restarts the cycle. You can then get that death card on subsequent playthroughs. You can also get death cards from your friends on Steam, or I would assume PlayStation Network.
Absolutely. And, Rick, I realized we never mentioned the candelabra, did we?
I think you alluded to it, but yeah, let's talk about it.
I was going to say, I definitely described the scale system as like a candelabra. The way that we lose this game, we have a candelabra with 2 lit candles, and when you lose a fight, one of your candles goes out, and it won't be restored until the end of that first map, God willing. But if both go out, then that's whenever you are taken to the room that Rick has just mentioned, and your death card is made.
Yeah, you get one shot. You get one failure, and then after that, it's Coitons for you.
It is Coitons, isn't it?
It's Coitons for you. So that's kind of the map. That's the things that you're going to encounter generally. There are 4 maps: the woodlands, the wetlands.
It's the wetlands, yeah, no. I mean, it is the wetlands. I mean, there's the Wetlands Institute in New Jersey, after all.
Yeah, it's big, like Monday versus Monday vibes, you know?
I do.
The woodlands, the wetlands, the snow line, and the cabin. Each of these, they're all going to have the same nodes. Like, you're not going to get special, except for the cabin, you're not going to get special nodes in any of these. But each one ends in a boss, and you've got to beat the boss to move on. Every boss has 2 things in common. They all have a special gimmick, and they all will preemptively extinguish one of your candles. So you only get one shot to beat each of these bosses.
And that's why it's important to keep yourself alive as much as possible. Keep Yourself Alive by Queen. You know the song, it amps you. We all feel it. But no, Keep Yourself Alive allows you to keep both of your candles going into the boss fight. And if you have both, he extinguishes one and gives you the smoke. And that is your card that you can play as almost like an extra squirrel off the bat is what it is.
Mm-hmm. And if memory serves, you get a bone whenever it dies, and you can use it as a sacrifice. I think 2 bones.
I believe it's 2 bones, but yeah, you can use it as 2 bones. Old 2 bones.
There goes old 2 bones down the road. He just yelled at a cashier. She didn't do nothing wrong.
He's an invertebrate. So no, but if you go into the boss fight with only 1 candle, you do not get the smoke. And Leshy with these boss fights, he cheats. He goes hard with his methodology.
Yes, let's talk about these boss fights.
The first one sucks.
Well, that's interesting because my favorite and the hardest, I think, is the second one. But let's go in order. Okay. So the first one is the
Prospector.
The Prospector. Thank you. The Prospector.
He puts on a mask.
And see, well, that's part of Leshy's whole deal is he's so involved in telling a story and keeping the theatrics alive. Like, not histrionics. It's not like overly produced and overly dramatic, but he's doing theater. So he puts on masks for all of these and assumes a character. It's so cool. But when you take a step back and realize it's just you being held in captivity against your will in a strange cabin, it's also extraordinarily creepy.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. But the prospector. So the prospector's whole deal. Does he have any gimmicks in the first round? Yes, he does.
Yes, he does the mule.
In the first round, he plays 2 cards real quick. He plays a coyote, I think, and a mule.
Yes.
The mule's got 5 health, which is quite a lot. But if you kill the mule, you get 5 cards. It's at this point I realized that we glossed over something incredibly important. There are a certain selection of cards in this game that are sentient and will talk to you. Wow, we
That's
really
very
glossed
vital
over
to
that.
the story. My God, that is the backbone.
So the first one that you get is the stoat. It looks like a little. Stoats are an actual animal, which I did not know before this actually. Because I'm big dumb. But
it's like a weasel.
the stoat, like when you first encounter the stoat, he'll talk to you. The text will appear like where the name goes, and his gist is saying like, just play along. We're gonna get you out of this. Just listen to what I'm telling you. That's the first one. You also find a stink bug, and when you find the stink bug,
She's in the safe.
Yes, she is in the safe. It is apparent immediately that her and the stoat know each other. She begins to refer to him as P, and then she stops and she refers to him as the stoat. Again, very clear that the two of them know each other. You can also get the stunted wolf. That's another one that is actually hidden away quite heavily.
Can't wait to talk about that one.
But all of these cards know each other. Their goal is seemingly to stop whatever Leshy is doing and get out. So they're on your side for all intents and purposes at the beginning of this. Can't believe we glossed over that.
I can't believe it either. I love the sentient cards so much. They will give you advice. The stoat will tell you when you've misplayed.
It's become a bit of a meme because no matter what you do, the stoat will be like total misplay. Or like another cool thing is when you sacrifice them, if you sacrifice them as their cards are like vanishing, they'll go like, what the hell? Or like, are you kidding me?
Like, oh, come on. It's taken away halfway through its text.
It's very good.
Funny. It's brilliantly done. But the two that you are heavily involved with, from the first one, you have the stoat, who actually, and I love this. Whenever you sacrifice a sigil to put it onto the stoat, above where the name stoat usually is, it just says it's an honor. Like they're aware that someone is being sacrificed for them to. It's.
And conversely, whenever you're selecting who you're going to sacrifice, what they'll be saying is like, please no.
Nope, not me.
Or nope. Yeah, what reminded me is like when you get to the prospector, the stoat will tell you that the mule is the key.
Pop that mule, yeah. I
Pop
love
that mule.
Mm-hmm. So, also real fast, while we're kind of in the past, before we go back to the prospector, another spot on the board that you can land on is a backpack. That is where you can replenish your items that you use. That's important because if you do have too many items, he gives you a card instead, and it's the pack rat, who also replenishes your items mid-battle. Just wanted to throw that in. But that first fight against the prospector, you fight the mule and the coyote. If the coyote is defeated, the mule starts moving across the board. That's what its sigil does. It has no attack. And if you pop the mule and get the pack, you get, again, 5 cards, as Rick said. But if you end up diminishing Leshy's life points, one of his candles goes out, and he turns any one of your cards that is on the board actively into a pile of gold.
Yes. Yeah, each boss fight is going to have 2 stages, except for the final one, and they've all got special mechanics. So the prospector, like Ben said, turns any card on your side of the field into a gold nugget, and which he immediately summons a dog and, breaks them. So the key here is to just kind of manage where you can summon and when. I think out of all of the bosses, the prospector might be the easiest. I mean, RNG can really screw you here, but especially the one coming up, some of these bosses can be a real bear.
Yeah, I would say that the prospector, I don't know if I'd call him the hardest per se, But I will say I think that there's another one that is way easier, and it's not the one that you think is the hardest, because I think there's merit to that. But at the end of whenever we do defeat Prospector Leshy, Leshy offers us a box full of cards, 3 cards that are more rare. Some of them are very confusing in appearance, and you don't know what their purpose is. Again, most of the creatures at this part of the game are woodland, but there's like the Ouroboros. There's the long elk, which just looks like a vertebrae on the board. There's the, I don't know how to say this, the Urulai or something, which I think is basically like a yeti. Get some really strange cards at this point in the game.
Yeah, you'll get special cards after you defeat each of these bosses. But that once you beat the Prospector, you move on to the next map, which is the Wetlands. And it's the presentation is the same. You're still going to be going through the map all the way up until you get to the boss. And this boss is the Angler. Really sinister looking mask. Speaks in very short sentences. Also has very cool music.
Yeah, it's very cello heavy, bass heavy at this point, and I love that theme for the Angler.
Now the Angler, the reason that I think the Angler is the most difficult is because in the first round, his special gimmick. Well, first of all, the Angler has a lot of flying and diving cards, but that aside, the gimmick in the first round, the mechanic in the first round, is that every other turn when you play a card, you will see a hook appear over that card. And if you play another card, the hook will shift to the new card. On the next turn, the Angler will take his hook and take whatever card the hook ended up over. Now, you can game this so like he's only taking your squirrels or things like that, or he's hooking a card that's in front of his card that's more powerful. So you can use this to your advantage, certainly. The challenge, then, is in the second round. He summons chum buckets in front of any monster that you have on the field. Now, you'll remember, we said that at the end of each turn, monsters have to attack. There's no option to end your turn prematurely. When you attack the chum buckets, they automatically transform into great white sharks.
4 attack each, everybody.
4 attack, 4 health, and they dive. So you're not... Oh, is it 2 health?
Only 2 health, but it doesn't matter because they're diving.
Because they're diving, yeah. So what you don't want to do is attack every single chum bucket that he summons, because he'll summon more. Because then you've got 4 great whites, and, to misappropriate the musings of a certain movie, you're going to need a bigger boat. Did you like that? Was that good?
That was
great.
Was
that good? Is this clip worthy? Is this Are you hearing this on Instagram in a clip that I created right now? Are we meta? Are we meta in the meta game?
We're beyond meta, Rick. We are.
This is appropriate for this episode.
We are Omicron.
Hey, if you're hearing this on Instagram, hey pal, why don't you smash that like button? Yeah, I'm talking directly to you.
Click the bell. Wait.
Eric Guess or Dave Jackson? We pick on Dave a lot on this show. I'm sorry.
That's because we love Dave.
It's true. But yes, that's the Angler's last hurrah. The easiest way to do this is to just somehow deal with one of the sharks and then just attack through that lane. Because if you don't attack the chum buckets, like, they're not hurting you, you know?
But for your first playthrough, let's just say that you beat the Prospector and then you go in to fight the Angler and you're like, well, I can figure out what the hook is. You know what I mean? Like, I knew what the hook was, so I was like, okay, I need to beat this guy quickly. But then it was like, all right, I beat him. He's not going to turn me into gold. How bad's it going to be? He puts chum buckets in front of you and says, go fish. And I was like, son of a bitch, what is going to happen?
I lost to the Angler so many times.
He's hard, man. He's real hard.
But when you beat the Angler, I think this happens if you die and then have to restart, you get his fish hook. And he says it's a gift to take out the other folks, so it kind of implies that the angler knows the trapper and knows the prospector, which is we find out is true, but it's also very cool.
It is very cool. Somewhere along the way, we are given another item that is not pliers, but is in fact a pair of scissors. The pair of scissors is revelatory. I'm not sure when precisely we get them, Rick. Do you know when that is?
They're just a common. I mean, they're not common, but they're just a common item.
Well, I'm not talking about those scissors.
Oh, that's a knife.
Oh, it is a knife. Sorry. That's right, everybody. I forgot. We're given a knife at a random point. We are also given scissors, but those are just a common item that we can use to cut up one of his cards. The knife, I feel like we should talk about here just because of what it does.
Yeah, and around this time, you'll need to use the knife too. So the knife is pretty similar to the pliers. You're not told what it does, but when you use it, you stab out your own eye and put it on the scale.
And is it worth 4 or 5?
It's worth enough so that if you attack one more time, you win.
And it hurts your vision, like you can't see your cards as clearly. You can still see, but it's a little bit red and it's a little bit fuzzy. At the end of the match against the boss or whoever you use the knife against, which you don't know what the knife's going to be for, but of course you're jabbing out your own eye. At the end of the match, he'll give you a rare card, but then he'll also say, I'm not completely heartless here, pick out a new eye. And there are a bunch of eyeballs just in this wooden box, which is fine, I guess. And they all look pretty normal.
From past challengers.
Right, from past challengers. They all look pretty normal, except for one has these glowing lines and squares and circles, which, of course, you should just pick up the one that looks like it's, pumped full of chemicals, right?
Pumped full of Monster Energy drink.
Yes, it is. But that eyeball, when you put it in and you blink once or twice, there you can see writing that was previously not available to you on the box that said, "The cuckoo clock holds salvation."
Yeah, this new eye is magical. It gives you magic vision. It lets you see things, kind of like Google Glass, which is a reference that I'm sure everybody will understand because that was a popular product. And yeah, like you said, Ben, you can see special text that says like salvation is in the cuckoo clock. This is how you get a special item that will end the run, which we could talk about after we get to the cabin. If you find a jar of sentient green goo, I don't remember what the name is. I want to say it's Goobert.
I hope you're right.
I think I might be wrong because that sounds silly. But if you find this green goo, normally if you
That's
talk
correct.
to him,
Goobert is correct, everybody.
Great. Normally, if you talk to him, he's just screaming in agony because he's trapped in a jar, which, fair. But if you talk to him after you got the eye, he does some serious foreshadowing by saying, "Oh, that's the eye of my master," Magnificus. And at the time, you don't know what that means, but you find out soon.
So after we're done with the angler, we go through the snow line, which is really quite challenging. To be honest, we deal with elk, which are SOBs because they do 2 damage and have 4 health, and they move sideways all of the time. Really difficult fights at this point. We get to our next boss, though, and it is both the trapper and the trader. But the first form, of course, is one, and the second form is the other. I thought this was the easiest boss fight, personally.
I agree. Once you figure out how to play it, the challenge in the first part is he plays these like mechanical frogs. I don't remember what they're called, but they're super easy to defeat. The problem is when you defeat them, they turn into spring traps. Spring traps are also very easy to defeat, but whenever you defeat a spring trap, it automatically destroys whatever card hit it. So it's a good wall of defense that will also destroy your cards. So it can be tough if you don't have like a good deck.
Yeah. The first round of this fight is harder, I think, than the second, because the first round, once you like deplete his walls of defense and have lost your own cards in the battle. The second round, he's like, I'll trade you for pelts.
And that's cool because it's rewarding you for doing what the game has been trying to get you to do, break the game. Because by breaking the game, we mean creating super powerful cards. When you have super powerful cards, you're going to overkill your enemy. When you overkill an enemy, you're rewarded in extra gold teeth that you can keep. You trade those for pelts. The more pelts that you're able to trade to the trapper here, whether they're cheap pelts or expensive pelts, the more of his monsters you get. So he lays out all of his like super crazy good cards that have sigils that they shouldn't have. Like you'll have a bear that can dive, or you'll have a snake that not only has the death sigil but also has the unkillable sigil. Like they're really powerful cards. And he says trade for what you can, but just know that everything you don't take, I will play on his next turn. So if you've got a bunch of pelts, you could take a lot of his powerful cards. And though he'll keep playing more, including like death cards of other people, such as Casey, which will become important soon, I'm with you. It's, if you're playing your cards right, so to speak, this fight is not difficult.
All I did was just swept the front line, so he has no defense, and then I do damage.
Yeah, for this one, a good defense is a good offense. Truly. Like, the quicker you could take him down, the better.
Yeah, honestly, just whatever pelts you have, remove those two cards from in front of your two most powerful cards, and you'll just deal the damage necessary to win, generally. So, yeah, it's a good fight. But after this, he takes away the snow line map, as he's done with the other two maps, and he puts the last one before us, which has a purple light over it, and the map is purple. And we see this figure of Leshy. This what was the word you used?
I don't remember.
There's a little drawing of Leshy on the map. I think it's at this point, right?
Yeah. This one also takes us out of the map for a second. We go into our first person POV, and we're walking a straight line towards the cabin in the woods. And like you said, you see this giant figure of Leshy appear in front of the moon. And as you walk forward, he puts his hand down. A giant hand, like he's a giant. And this is where you can get 2 of his boon cards. You can get 2 of them if you beat his challenges. The challenges are just like the trials you face on the map. But these boons are super powerful. I got 2 of them, which made this fight a breeze.
I don't remember the boons at all, to be honest.
So there are a couple. The 2 that I had were... you get the boon of the I don't know if these are the words. I forgot to bring them up. But you get the boon of the forest, which lets you start out every fight. Well, which lets you start out the fight with Leshy.
Oh, the boons. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which lets you start off the fight with Leshy with a full line of trees, which is very useful. And then I also had the boon of the magpie, which lets you, anytime you draw from your deck, you get to choose the card. So those 2 together made this fight a cinch for me.
You mean the final fight, or?
Phase 1 of the fight.
Of all of these? Yeah. The thing that made fighting Leshy easy for me was the number of death cards I'd had.
Let's get into it. So whenever you enter the cabin, you're kind of back at your seat at the table. And the lights turn on, and you see Leshy for the first time in full view. And, he looks... Leshy is modeled after a sort of wood spirit, like a mystical being.
Slavic mythology, I believe.
Yeah, and he looks like that. Like, he's got a beard just full of, like, moss and stuff like that. He looks very, very creepy. He looks very creepy, but also has an air of sadness to him, which... is it's important to the story. So you fight him. He extinguishes one of your candles, but then he lights 3 candles for himself, just in case, quote unquote. The first round of this is really tough because he switches every turn from the prospector to the angler to the trapper, including their gimmicks. And man, dealing with all 3 of those right in a row can be so challenging.
Yeah, I hate the Prospector's gimmick so much.
It ruins any good cards that you might have to play, because sometimes he just starts off by throwing down like a 7 attack card. And you're like, well, shit, I have to throw my best cards. And then, then he comes in, there's gold in them cards. And he just pickaxes them to death.
Yeah, it's something. But that's phase 1. And if you defeat phase 1, phase 2, golly, what does phase 2 begin with? What is his shtick here?
So phase 2 begins, he'll put down a row of grand fir trees in front of some airborne cards. And then I believe in this phase, he also uses a lot of death cards. So like any death cards that you made, he'll use, your friends have made, and then like the death cards from in the game. That's what he uses.
Yeah.
This one isn't as hard as the first phase, to be perfectly honest, I don't think. It's just kind of a beefed up regular fight.
And then there's phase 3.
Phase 3 is cool because Leshy doesn't break composure, but here it's clear that he's like rattled that he's going to lose. So he turns around. He's like, oh, that damn moon. And then he's like, well, it can be useful to me. He takes a picture of the moon, and his side of the board is entirely the moon card. The moon card has 40 health, but only 1 attack, and it's got 3 sigils. The sigils are that it blocks aerial attacks, so you can't just attack Leshy directly. It attacks all 4 spaces at once.
Yep.
And then the third sigil, I think, is just, the third sigil, at the end of the turn, any squirrels that are on the field get sucked into the moon.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's incredible.
Yeah. Now, there is a very easy cheat to get through this match. Do you know about it?
I can't say that I do.
So if you play the Stink Bug or anything with the Stinky Sigil, the Stinky Sigil reduces the opponent's attack by 1. So it takes the moon's attack down to 0. And if you do that, Leshy comments on it. He says, that's a cheap move. And he's like, the Stinky Sigil, the moon does not have a sense of smell. This is stupid. It's very funny. He calls it absurd. But it's a quick way to just destroy this. And after you beat the moon, you beat Leshy, and that kind of signifies the end of this first playthrough. What happens though is he gives you like a congratulatory pile of meat, which you obviously do not eat. And then he takes you to this back room. You don't get let go. He said he's going to take your portrait to commemorate your win. So he takes your portrait, just the same as if he's creating a death card, and it starts the whole run over again, but not before we get a special little, not a cutscene, but we get to see some videos.
There's an aspiring YouTuber named Luke Carter who calls himself the Lucky Carter, and these videos, this is where we realize that we're playing a story within a story now.
Yeah, we've been playing as Luke, who has been playing the game Inscryption this whole time. When we beat Leshy before we watch these videos, he talks to the screen. He's the one that talks at the very beginning that says, let's see what's on this thing. You beat Leshy. He's like, oh, I beat him. And then he accidentally knocks over his camera. And then we get to see 6 or 8 videos.
Yes, it is either 6 or 8. These videos kind of show him, he's opening cards. That's what he does. He opens decks of trading cards. And there are a few videos of that, but then there's one video where he is saying that he went to a yard sale and he found some Inscryption cards that are old, and he opens one pack that's already been opened. There are coordinates written on one of the cards. He goes into the woods to those exact coordinates, which aren't too far away from him, thankfully. And he digs up a box that has a floppy disk in it. And that floppy disk says Inscryption on it. And, of course, he has to get himself something that can use a floppy disk. So he gets the converter, and what anybody would do in the year of our Lord 2022, 2021. It was sure, I'm not worried about this affecting my computer.
Yeah, and that sort of sets up the ARG elements to this. So Luke is playing this actual game on his computer. This sends you into Act 1, Part 2, which is just going through Act 1 again. Occasionally, Luke will like comment on things like, "Oh, I hate this boss," or things like that. The key to beating this one is we have to get inside of the cuckoo clock. Ben, you alluded to this earlier. Once you get the eye, we find salvation in the cuckoo clock. What that means is we get the solution to the cuckoo clock puzzle, and when we open it, we get some film. And we need this film.
We get the gold film.
Film as in, it occurs to me that we might have to clarify since we're in 2022. Film for a camera.
Yes.
You see, children, back in the day when cameras were not just attached to your cell phones, even in the days before digital cameras, we had cameras that took film. We wore an onion on our belt, which was the style at the time.
It still is for me, Rick. I'm never gonna change. No, it's gold film, which Leshy, whenever we get to the end of the game again, is concerned as to how we came across that golden film, and he gets very anxious and upset. And at this point, we capture his image with the camera and turn him into a card. And in that room where the flashing light has been, where he turns us into a death card, we see a pile of bodies. And, well, actually, no, we're walking around in the darkness at that point, aren't we?
There's like flashing coming from... So when we turn Leshy into a card, we get access to the new game card.
That's right. I just forgot the room went dark first.
Yes, it does. There's flashing coming from that. There's also flashing coming from outside. But in the room, we can see piles of clothes, like bodies. It's the first time that we get to explore this area. We can also see a certain cyborg-looking thing in one of the rooms, which becomes, important here in a bit. But this is how we finally get access to Act 2 of the game.
Which is new game, everybody. We can finally click on new game.
And what this is supposed to be the original game Inscryption.
What would you say, Rick? It's a 16-bit, 32-bit style game.
It looks like a game that you could play on a Game Boy Color.
Yeah, it really does. This section is kind of easy to do quickly, I think. You know what I mean?
It is and it isn't. So the gist of this game is that there are 4 scribes, and we learn their names. We have Leshy, the scribe of the beasts, Grimora, the scribe of the undead, Magicus, the scribe of wizards or magic, I don't remember which one, and PO3, the scribe of technology. And these scribes are here. They're the ones that created this card game, and you are a challenger that has come to replace one of them. So you're kind of going through and trying to beat them all. This act plays out like an old school adventure game, and it's also a trading card game builder. So like we had alluded to earlier, you only have 20 card slots for this one, and you have to build your deck according to those parameters. The interesting thing here is you're forced to make a choice of what kind of deck you want to start out with at the very beginning of the game, but they don't give you any context to what that means. And you can really screw yourself over on a first playthrough if you don't know what's coming.
I did. I really did.
What did you choose first?
The Magics.
That's literally the hardest one.
Yep, you're telling me, pal.
See, I knew this was coming, so I just stuck with Leshy. I just stuck with what I knew.
Smart.
Well, let's talk about them a little bit. Leshy's deck is exactly what we've been playing up till this point. Grimora's deck is the undead. It's got some, like there's some more nuance to it, but it's basically the bone system. You use bones to summon monsters. The 2 new mechanics introduced here are energy and magic. Energy, we'll see more of energy in Act 3. The gist of it is that on turn 1, you have 1 energy. You can only summon 1 energy cards. Turn 2, you've got 2 energy. You can only summon 2 energy cards, etc. Pretty easy. It also introduces circuit system, but That's pretty much what it is. We'll talk more about that in Act 3. Tell us about the magic system, Ben, because I hate this system.
It's a really easy system to get lost in the weeds in. There are different styles of card that involve different gems that bring them out. So if you don't have the right cards, you can't bring out any other cards. It's not even like the sacrifice system. It's worse than the sacrifice system by a long shot. There's green, blue, and orange are the different styles of magic cards that exist, and they can't necessarily exist at the same time unless you have the right stuff. I don't know, Rick. It was a bad idea.
But what would save this system, I think, is if the magic cards were strong.
Because they aren't.
Because like you said, to summon these monsters, you have to play these moxes on the field. They're basically just gems that let you play monsters, but they take up one of your rows. So you go from having 4 to 3, and that's only if you want to have one color. If you want 2 colors, then you're down to 2. And so the logical thing to think would be okay, so the trade-off then is if I can't have as many creatures attacking, then the creatures that I do have are stronger. But no, they're actually not at all.
So we have this land of Inscryption, and this feels very much like Pokemon. We have to go and take care of each of the 4 scribes in their areas, though a lot of areas aren't yet accessible. My personal favorite is the breaking of the 4th wall whenever you are trying to cross a bridge, and the character says, "Hey, just to let you know that we're still working on this bridge. It's out, but it should be done exactly at the time that you finish this boss."
I only encountered that in Act 3. I didn't see that in Act 2.
It happens in Act 2 as well.
Are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure you can go anywhere at the start of Act 2.
I had a broken bridge in Act 2 for me.
Oh, okay. Or maybe I'm wrong.
I remember seeing her face.
The easiest one to do at the start of Act 2 is Leshy. You're going to have to defeat all 4 scribes, because that's why you're here. Leshy, to fight Leshy, you have to fight his 3 subordinates, which are the bosses from Act 1, the Angler, the Trapper, and the Prospector. You have to do some mild puzzles to get to these guys. There's a safe code painted on the ground outside. You have to get into the safe using that code. It's a pile of meat. You have to use the meat to get the dog, and then take a picture of the dog, and that's the only way the Prospector will fight you. Just little puzzles like that. I didn't find the puzzles in this act to be all that interesting. They were pretty straightforward. They just kind of felt like busy work a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they were. I mean, it was some good world building for the style of game that they were trying to put forward.
Yeah. But you've got to beat all of the scribes. Every time you beat somebody in this game, you get, or in this act, you get a pack of cards, like a little booster pack. You can also buy cards or buy packs. Otherwise, it's mostly the same system. Leshy is more or less the same Leshy that you know from before. So fighting him, no big deal. He's sad that things end so quickly, but, such is life. Which boss do you want to talk through next, real quick? Want to maybe get through these ones? We could probably get through these ones relatively quickly to get into Act 3.
Yes, Grimora, you can fight Grimora as well. You have to fight through some ghosts and help solve what their tombstones are to get to her, who they were, how they died.
Yeah, it's for example, the person that died of freezing to death, or something of that matter. It said, they can't stop shivering. So you pair those together and then boom.
It's very much like a kid's computer game, you know what I mean, with some Pokemon elements. It's fine.
Yeah, she has some unique mechanics whenever you're fighting her. Any creatures that are killed in Phase 1 will be resurrected 2 turns later onto her side of the field. So you gotta move quickly. Phase 2, all of your cards are destroyed that you have on the field, but are given back to you as zombies that are very weak.
Yeah.
So kind of cool. It's a very cool flavor. I like Grimora a lot. I think she's a cool character.
I like her too. It's worth mentioning that there is a crypt beneath her area where if you bring 2 specific cards to that crypt as an offering, I don't know what his name is, but he's that horned beast that exists. kind of that bullhead with like the sigil on his forehead, he'll give you an object. He'll give you something special. I forget what it is, an artifact of some sort. After we beat Grimora and Leshy, who are on the eastern side of the map, we can go across the bridges. In between everything are what look like 4 tombstones. They're just 4 stones that represent the scribes. We then can go, I think we have to go to PO3 or PO, whatever you want to call them, next. And I found this entire facility very fishy to begin with. And then, things kind of developed as to why they were fishy, but...
Mm-hmm. It's something that we glossed over a little bit in Act 1 is as time goes on, the Stoat's appearance starts to change, and he starts to kind of look like he has the head of a computer. And then when you beat Leshy, PO3 actually runs into the cabin and says, I just wanted to make sure that I saw you lose. I'm not going to be your pet anymore. So it's strongly implying, well, it's not even implying, it's telling you that PO3 is the Stoat. Like that was who the Stoat was. Grimora was the bedbug, stink bug, excuse me. Yeah. And Magnificus was the stunted wolf.
Yeah.
PO3, he forces you to go talk to his workers to make them build better robots for him. And they all end up sacrificing themselves to do that. So you just go through and fight all of them. This is also where we get some glitchiness that is revealed in due time. We see some glitchy funkiness here. But he is the technology card wielder, the technology deck wielder. This has a really cool conveyor belt mechanic.
Yes.
I liked it a lot. At the end of every turn, all cards shift to the left. The leftmost cards shift up and then become your opponent's cards. It's very neat. So it's playing with this idea of positioning.
I reached starvation at this point, and the starvation started fighting for me at one point.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had one of his best cards fighting for me at one point too. It's just super satisfying. It's super cool. It's a fun mechanic.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like Act 2. I think it gets a lot of hate, but I think it's great.
There's nothing to hate about it. It's a great act. And I mean, again, I see everything as world and story building. So like I see their functionality. Like this just makes sense to me. Like of course Leshy exists in this like 16-bit cabin. You know what I mean? Like he had to come from somewhere. After we defeat PO3, we go down to Magnificus's castle, which is this extremely tall tower, and there are like floating islands around it that are chained to the earth. And
we've got to beat his grad students before we could fight him, which I thought was really funny.
It was very funny.
They're all downtrodden and like mistreated, just like actual grad students. So this is basically real.
Yeah, no, this is where we can actually experience Goobert and some other grad students, as it were. Plenty of puzzles here. I really liked this castle as soon as I figured out what was going on. And then, I don't know, we get up to Magnificus, and I don't know. This is very interesting. Like you kind of start to see some hints, especially in this area, and like letters that were written. You know what I mean?
Magnificus has a mechanic where he paints over your cards. So if your card has a sigil, he'll take it away and give it a new sigil that are generally not as good. And he does the same thing to his cards at the end of, or during the second phase, excuse me. But it can be pretty tough. The presentation of this fight, I think, is the best out of all 4, just by virtue of how Magnificus looks and how his field looks.
Yeah, I felt the most sad for Magnificus, but I think we'll get to that in due time. But after we defeat these 4 scribes, we go back to that central island, right? And
not to interrupt you, but
please. Before
that, we get a second batch of videos at some point. I think it's after we beat the second boss, but I'm not 100% on that. In these second batches of videos, the reason that we see them is because the screen flashes and it says like memory card full, so Luke has to stop recording his gameplay, and that's when we get to watch his videos. The first one, it's him writing an email to Game Funa. He's kind of drafting it out loud. He's just telling them like, hey, I don't know if you ever made a copy of Inscryption as a video game, but I found one. It's kind of weird. Like, is this a prank? And then Another video, it's him doing a YouTube video talking to his followers about this. And he's like, have any of you ever heard of this? This is super weird. Like, I don't know what's going on. The company responds in another video saying that they never made any such thing. But if he found this, then he's obligated to return it, as this is their IP, and they're going to proceed with legal action if he doesn't. This comes in the form of a woman who, this is another video, like comes to Luke's house and starts questioning him. Luke plays dumb. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, that's funny because like I'm a huge fan of your channel, actually. So I saw your videos. And he's like, oh, that's so crazy. He also mentions like that she got through his gate, and his locked gate, I should say, and obviously tracked him down to his home. So we're starting to see like the company Game Funa, something fishy is going on there. We don't know quite enough about it yet, but something's happening.
All of these videos do show up. You're right. It's after Magnificus, the battle with him, because he'll attempt to warn you about something, but that's when it runs out of battery.
Another thing that we could see after beating Magnificus 2 is we could find a letter that he was writing to Grimora.
Yes.
On his desk, basically warning her like that PO3 is out of control.
Mm-hmm. So after we watch these videos, we go to those kind of tombstone things, and it's at this point in the game that we're told that we get to replace one of the scribes. Rick, who did you pick?
Well, I picked Magnificus. Who did you pick?
I picked Grimora.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't matter. They have unique text. Like Magnificus says that he's disappointed this is over, but he's like, I already know the outcome of this. You're not fighting me. It doesn't matter because whoever you pick, the game sort of like glitches a little bit, and PO3 shows up and sends them away. And he's like, nope, you're fighting me now. The fight with him is not winnable because he plays a card at some point called Old Data. And he's speaking very cryptically about setting things in motion and et cetera, et cetera. And when you finally attack the glitched card, Old Data, everything starts to sort of fall apart. And he's like, he's basically, he says, this is exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much.
I love this whole scene and like what it brings about. But then what it brings about, this was the moment in the game where I was like, oh, it's still not over. And I got a little bit forlorn about this section and got a little bit like, ugh. And then I started to get some momentum through it, and I felt a little bit better going into what I thought was too short of a finale, but we'll get there in time.
I am kind of with you. I was ready for this game to be over before Act 3 was actually done. So everything sort of whites out, blacks out, whatever. And when you you're basically in a reskinning of the first act. You're at a table, but this time the DM is PO3. This is PO3's take on the game, Bottopia. You can't get up at the moment. You're kind of like shackled to the table.
You sure are.
So the thing about PO3's take on the game is he's kind of a foil to Leshy. He's the opposite. PO3 does not care about story. He doesn't care about lore. He doesn't care about theater. This is a numbers game to him. He just likes the crunch of the numbers. So the gameplay, in some ways, I don't want to say it's better because I don't agree with that, but it's more involved than Leshy's. But he's basically making shit up as he goes as a DM. he's like, oh, you can't go there yet because, well, it's not finished. And what are you doing? Well, you're fighting the Uber bots. Yeah, that's it. The Uber bots. And it's like it's comical that he's just like flying by the seat of his ass to get through the DMing.
Yeah, it made me that kind of made me a little bit depressed because I was like, oh man, I miss Leshy. It's worth noting that Bottopia is kind of similar to the world that you were just playing in Act 2. But what's also interesting is that when you are unshackled eventually in Bottopia, in his world across the table from him, it is a copy of the temple that he resides in. in Act 2 in the 16-bit game.
Mm-hmm. It's the same deal, and you're going to be going through it too. You can only get up when he tells you to, otherwise you're kind of just there, or at least at first. The way the map has changed is there's no more nodes. You're going through a series of rooms, and to get to the next room, you click on an arrow. You kind of progress that way. So in each room, you can't really walk around. You just select which way you want to go. Mm-hmm. The cards, we're switching to the technology system, so everybody has energy. There's no more blood sacrifices or bone sacrifices. There are 5 lanes instead of 4, to which PO3 says Leshy could never do that. He's very bitter about Leshy. He does not like Leshy. He really doesn't respect any of them because, like, to him, they're not good at the game. They're not optimal, so they're not worth anything, you know?
Right.
And then everything attacks with guns here, which is, you know, it is what it is.
Whatever. So he won't initially allow you to get up from the table, as we've established. The battery of the game board will die after the campaign begins, and he will let you get up, like in the cabin, and go get the new battery for this game to continue. This is also a series of puzzles, not unlike what you have to do in Leshy's cabin. To some extent, there's some stuff that it's kind of like the CAPTCHA challenge, if I'm not mistaken. There's some, was there like pictures you had to click on and stuff?
yeah, pretty much.
Stupid.
That's one of them. Prove you are not a robot. That's one of them. I don't know, man. Like, this whole Act 3 just feels like a less successful version of Act 1 to me.
Which I think it's supposed to be honest, because it shows the bitterness, you know?
It is to a point. I will concede that, but it still doesn't change the fact that I just wanted it to end. I really did. Because everything is so similar. You're fighting, you know, it's the escape room, and then also the fighting. You have to fight 4 Uber bots, which replace the scribes. I was so done before this was even over. I really was.
Yeah, this part, PO3. I mean, they made sure to make sure that PO3 came off as very, very tedious and kind of annoying, and also not into the DM stuff as much. Like, it almost felt like he was making fun of dungeon mastering whenever you would take on his boss forms.
Each of the 4 Uber bots are going to have a gimmick, just like before. But their gimmicks are all related to technology. So one gimmick, for example, one of the Uber bots' name is Gully or Golly. I forget which one.
Golly.
And Golly is the form of like a sweet old woman that's just so excited to be connected to the internet. And like they'll play a mole card, and it's like an actual picture of a mole, and they'll be like, "Oh, this is a mole? How fun! Isn't that great?" And then with that fight in particular, also they'll play cards of your Steam friends with their pictures and names, which is pretty cool. Did you fight me?
I think I might have. Did you fight me?
I don't think I did.
I think you had like 11 defense.
'Cause I'm a big boy.
You're a beautiful boy.
Yeah, I think that one I might have been at that point. My deck was locked in. I got a really OP card pretty early on in the form of a sniper, which the sniper lets you attack any position on the board. You get to choose. But the sigil was the death sigil, so anything I hit would just die immediately.
Oh man!
Yeah, totally OP.
Holy cow!
Like it's nuts. But one other twist to this version is instead of squirrels in your side deck, you have energy little empty vessels. Yeah. And after you defeat each of the Uber bosses, you PO3 will power them up and give them a sigil, which is pretty helpful.
Oh yeah.
As you're going through and as you're beating all these Uber robots, we get a final pack of videos.
We do. It's after battling one of the Uber bots that the memory card is full again, and we get to watch more videos. This time, Luke is calling a woman who, the lady who he bought the Inscryption cards from, and finds out that her daughter, named Casey Hobbs, was a developer for the Inscryption video game and passed away years ago. He does find out that she died in a fire working late at the facility. Late one night, he hears that someone, this is another video, it's a separate video, Late one night, he hears that someone has like broken into his house. And then there's one more video of him like laughing and playing with weights on a scale.
The same scale from Act 1.
Yes.
The damage counter. It's kind of signaling that like the game is coming to life. You know, a lot of these videos that we're seeing, they're of an era. Like, did you grow up watching Marble Hornets?
No.
Do you know what Marble Hornets is?
I feel like I used to know what it is.
As somebody into the internet scary stuff, I figured you would. It was the birth of
I remember this.
The birth of Slender Man, sort of.
Yeah, I remember this.
Just amateur found footage stuff on YouTube that was like a scary series. I loved that shit as a kid. I never finished the series, but I remember loving it. It has that kind of flavor to it, and I don't know. It's maybe I that's just a part of me that will permanently live in 2011 and 2012. But like, I don't know. It doesn't work for me anymore. That's not to say it won't work for somebody else, but like, I don't know. There's no accounting for taste, as they say.
There you go.
But it's interesting. One thing to point out is that Luke can't find anything about any kind of death at the company aside from that one statement, which is from the company. So something's going on. Like, we know something is going on, but this is just giving us more ammunition for that.
It is. Once we do defeat Golly, PO3 will notice that there is that the security camera's like broken in another room, and that he wants you to go and investigate this. However, the internet connection, thanks again to Golly, the sweet little lady who just wanted her internet to work, which I loved getting cards from random players online, and I loved giving away cards to random people online, which Golly does.
I got one named Dr. Fatboy. I'm not joking.
I feel like I might have made that.
There's only a certain number of like you get 3 name pieces you get to choose. I think I named mine Big Fat Boy.
I like that. I think I may have made 1 or 2 Esquires, but you in the dredging room are basically dragged down and interact with the other 3 scribes who are in their full 3D forms in front of you, and they're talking about stopping PO3's great transcendence that he keeps talking about.
Yes, this great transcendence becomes important really soon, but they've all decided to put aside their differences because remember, they all pretty much hate each other. It's some of them are unclear, but like Leshy and Magnificus in particular do not have a good relationship. Because when Leshy turned Magnificus into the stunted wolf, he took his eye out and locked him up extra tight. But they decided to put their differences aside because PO3 needs to die. And they tell you to keep playing the game. And once PO3 wins and thinks all is well, Leshy will come and snuff out any joy that he feels, which is it's super cool. I like this scene a lot.
The scene whenever Leshy actually does kill him.
Yes, but when you're just talking to them, I thought it was cool.
Oh, it's a badass scene because like you've got all 3 of them in front of you. Kind of this sort of level of like anti feels very Sweeney Todd to me because like they're all kind of evil in their own way, but like they're ganging up against other evils. I dig that a lot. Once you do defeat all 4 Uberbots, PO3 has you be returned to the start of the game. And he says that since you've beaten these bosses, these Uberbots, you have caused the great transcendence to begin for him. And he begins to upload Inscryption to the web. But that's exactly when what Rick said happens. Leshy appears with the other scribes, and Leshy with his own hands kills PO3.
Well, I want to expand upon that great transcendence because it's important.
Yes.
He's been talking about this the whole time. And what happens is he starts speaking directly to Luke. So like PO3's screen, like his face screen, will show Luke in the webcam, like as he's playing the game. And the goal of this was to upload this disk of Inscryption to the internet, distribute it widely, and in most versions, probability speaking, PO3 will be the one in charge, not Leshy, not Grimora. And as you defeated these Uber bots, you gave it internet access, you gave it file access to your computer, which is something that you do in one of the fights. It makes you like choose your files to become cards and stuff. Take screenshots, like set up the Steam, like you did all of this for them. You basically finished and pushed out the game. And like you said, Leshy does stop the upload by ripping PO3's head off, which is, it's not cinematic. It's almost anticlimactic, but it's just like he just grabs it and yanks it off. He just murders him instantly.
I mean, if I was that upset, and I was Leshy and I'd been through what I'd been through, and like, if that was my part, like, it doesn't need... Well, Leshy's not a pomp and circumstance guy. Like, he's just there to play the game in an artistic way. You know what I mean? And PO3 made light of and made short of all of that work that he did. So, like, I mean, it's a major insult not only to Leshy, but to everyone else.
Afterwards, it's successful, and Grimora actually has a bit of her own agenda. They're all meeting again, the three scribes, and Grimora uses the folder of one of the Uberbots, the Archivist, to gain full access to the files and deletes the contents. The other scribes freak out about this, but Grimora says, this is how we end the cycle. Because what they wanted to do, the other scribes, is basically just restart this cycle over again. And this just continues, and the next time this person's in charge, the next time this person's in charge. Grimora wants to stop that. There is also the aspect of the old data that we haven't talked a ton about. I hate to be reductive about it, but it boils down to a demon is in the video game, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, more or less, like there's an evil spirit in the video game and we can't let the evil spirit get out. Like that's what it is, pretty much.
Yeah.
You're agreeing like you don't agree.
No, I mean, it's what it is. Like, basically, Magnificus wanted to reset the game, and Grimora was like, "No, we're all going down with it." Like, and I know that the trader at one point was like, "Old data can't be erased." So I mean, the demon is there forever, no matter what, I guess.
But the thing that's neat about this ending is, as things are deleting, you've got a little deletion progress thing on the side.
Yes.
As things are deleting, you have a battle with each one of these scribes one more time. So with Leshy, Leshy's whole goal was to just keep the card game going forever. And he was just like, we're dying because everything's being deleted. Let's just while the time away with another game. And as you're playing, you get your old deck and he's like, yeah, that card was really good. Like, you're really good at this game. Like, good job.
Yeah.
And then eventually he's just like, let's just keep playing without score. Like, we don't need to keep track of it. Which is kind of sad. Like, they kind of make you feel bad for Leshy.
Is Leshy the first person that you fight at this point, or is it Grimora?
I think it's Leshy. It might be Grimora.
Okay, I don't remember off the top of my head.
But at any rate, you kind of feel bad for Leshy, and at a certain point, as things are being deleted and disappearing, the bell disappears and deletes, and he's like, well, that's going to make things difficult. And he shakes your hand, and then he disappears.
It's really something. During all of this flashing imagery and other things that are happening, the game does cut to a video of Luke like screaming and hitting the floppy disk with a hammer, like trying to destroy it, which is also worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm. That comes after fighting Magnificus, right?
Oh, is that? I thought it was...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might be. It might be after Magnificus. Yeah, I think so.
Well, you fight, so you do the same thing with Grimora and Magnificus. And you get to basically see what Inscryption would have looked like if they were the boss instead of Leshy.
I wanted it. I wanted to go through it all with those two too.
What's cool about Grimora's is like, it uses a bones-based system, but what's neat about it is like she's about to do a boss battle just like Leshy used to do, and she puts on a pirate hat and shoots cannons, but then like everything gets deleted and she's like, oh, I thought we had more time.
I know. I was like, oh yeah, she's a good dungeon master, and then it's over.
But freaking Magnificus, dude. He turns it into Yu-Gi-Oh! I laughed so hard at this. I laughed so hard at this because you literally get a dual disc, like the thing on your wrist from Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes,
they call it
do.
a dual disc. And Magnificus's version of Inscryption sucks so much. It's the worst one.
Oh, it's horrible, yeah. The room
It's
was cool, but like, yeah, no.
It's rendered like an old, like a N64 game, and like as your little fighters
maybe, yeah.
are hitting each other, it's doing like cinematic like spins around the field. It's the Mox based system, so it really sucks.
Yes.
And
yes,
for some reason, you have to play it for quite a minute. You get 400 life points, and you're like, oh, okay. So like one hit will take away like what, 100 life points? No, one hit takes away 1 life point. So like you plink down 400 to 398, and it's like, how long do I have to do this?
It was bad. Oh, it was bad.
But just like everything else, everything gets deleted. Magnificus kind of falls and tries to crawl towards you to shake your hand, but he disappears.
I want to shake his hand.
He did, but he couldn't. He disappears. This is where the final thing, like everything is being deleted. It's almost all gone. It's just our little character. That's when we get to walk up to the file titled Old Data. And I think that's where this video plays.
I think you're right, yes. Luke hitting the floppy disk with a hammer, and then Luke it's that final video. Yes, the very final video is Luke on the phone with a journalist.
So before that, before he hits it with the hammer, when he opens the old data folder, it's like it shows a manila folder being opened, and like redacted information is shown, and like pictures that are blurred out, or like statements that are showed that shows like what this company Game Funa has been doing.
Yeah.
I'm not again, this just smacks of creepypasta. Like it's telling me about all this scary stuff without showing me it. Everything is redacted. You can't see anything. So I don't know. I was just like, okay, of course this is how it's going to end. But it does show Luke destroying the floppy disk with a hammer. Before we get this sort of final video.
The final video, final. Luke's on the phone and he's talking to a journalist trying to expose what he's found and what he's been going through. However, the woman who'd come to his house before returns and shoots him with a silenced pistol, bringing an end to his search for the truth.
Yeah, just as he was about to tell a reporter all about the confidential information he found in the old data folder. And that's the end of Inscryption. I gotta say, I don't think this is a good ending.
I have mixed feelings. I wanted more of the game. I would have loved to have fought more of Grimora and Magnificus. I would have loved to have seen that. I don't know if the videos did feel very much like a film project, but not like a film project. I know what they were going for, but it just, I don't know. I felt like there could have been a little bit better of execution with those sorts of things, but all in all, the game deleting itself and like watching, the world end for these characters, the scribes and so forth. I always like an apocalyptic sort of setting in games like this, but that's just me.
There's part of me that can't put my finger on why I don't like some of this, but I think a lot of it does just come down to that, like that very creepypasta style of writing. Like, what if a creepy video game, or what if a scary computer file? And then, it's just the tropes from there on out. It was so horrible, I felt sick. It was so horrible, I felt depression like I'd never felt before. Like, it's just sort of the same critiques that we talked about in Ben Drowned. I don't know. I don't want to call it outright lazy, because I don't think that's the right adjective for it, so much as I think it's maybe a bit shallow. I don't know. And it's tough because like Inscryption does so many other really cool things that I really like.
Well, and here's the thing about that. Without people like Bach, you don't have people like Mendelssohn. And I know you might be saying, okay, how did we jump from the 1730s all the way to the 1830s? Mendelssohn really sounds like I'm not trying to sound like that guy. If you go and listen to some of Mendelssohn's music, you can hear that there's a through line from eras before. And I think that that's kind of what this game, in a sense, is that not that it's necessarily saying, oh, we're going to try to do an exact copy, but it took elements that it liked from other games, added some original ideas, and, I think it improved upon and did a lot of things the right way, but I wanted more, and I think that's why I was close to a 10 but can't give it the full 10, because if the ending might have had a little bit of a better bow on it, Act 3, I liked seeing the fact that Poe was so disenchanted that he was like, I'm just going to be the opposite of what Leshy was. Like, okay, but there wasn't enough of a reward for going through that.
I can agree with that for sure.
But ultimately, I do find it to be a pretty original game with the whole, the cards are actually feeling things, and like they're like sacrificial burn marks on the there are like sacrificial burn marks on the cards and stuff. I loved so much of this game, and I don't play many, deck builders like ever. So the fact that I enjoyed one this much, I think, is probably the biggest surprise of all.
The real enjoyment was the monsters we sacrificed along the way.
All of the squirrels we killed.
R.I.P. squirrels. PETA will hate this one.
They will. PETA hates him. There is Casey's mod, which I don't know if we need to go into too much of.
I actually didn't play it. I know what it is, but I didn't play it.
I'm at level 8 right now.
Oh, nice.
It's very difficult. Casey's mod is, Rick and I were talking earlier about continuing to play the original card game. That's what Casey's mod is, except you can do whatever you want for the ante, and I'll let you all figure that out whenever you do it. But it's some more lore and story around Inscryption that you can get to flesh out the world a little bit better. So
there is also an actual ARG, like not an ARG within this game, but like a real world one. Ben and I talked before the episode. Neither of us really looked into it, but it deals a lot with like actual Soviet events, and like Hitler is involved somehow. It's another thing. I'm not the audience for that. I'm not in the pocket for it. So I'm probably not going to look into it, but it does confirm some like actual lore things that we see here in the game. Like, for example, there's a video in the ARG that reveals that the Great Transcendence actually did succeed, that PO3 got what he wanted. We didn't just win by ripping his head off. So if that is something that you are into, you could find more of it.
I will want to find more of that. We did it, Rick.
This is longer than I was expecting it to be.
Me too, but perhaps, it's a game worth talking about, so.
For sure. It's an overall recommendation, even if I'm not as hot on it as you are. Still recommend it.
It's like any piece of art. It's worth looking at from a number of different perspectives and then assessing it for yourself, because some of you are going to look at this and say, wow, this is the greatest deck builder I've ever played. And then there's some of you going to look at it and go, if this is trying to be a spooky game, it's failing, because I'm not getting jump scares. 0 out of 10. You'll land anywhere depending on what you're looking for.
It's true. So go out and play this game. Give it a shot. As of recording, it's discounted on PS5. I think you can get it for $15. So that's definitely well worth it.
Absolutely worth it. I'd say worth every penny for this game, ultimately.
I actually put the plugs at the beginning of the episode for this one, so we don't need to replug. You know where to find us: Instagram, Twitter, Patreon, Discord, Gmail. We've got it all.
Please, Gmail.
Please, somebody that's not pitching a product or asking to edit our podcast for money.
Maybe that means that we're doing something right, though. Maybe that means that somebody says, wow, these people are doing something worth editing. Or people are just out for money. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you we're not accepting any sponsorships. Not even the good folks at Manscaped, who offer a premium solution to trimming your...
There it is.
Fucking Manscaped. Well, since I said fucking Manscaped, that obviously means it's the end of the episode. So thanks for sticking around this doozy of an episode. Fun episode. As ever, my name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale. Catch you next time.